The Eleutheran Adventurers were a group of English Puritans and religious independents who left Bermuda to settle on the island of Eleuthera in the Bahamas in the late 1640s. The small group of Puritan settlers, led by a man named William Sale, had been expelled from Bermuda for their failure to swear allegiance to the crown, and were searching for a place in which they could freely practice their faith. This group represented the first concerted European effort to colonize the Bahamas. Background: the mid-17th century was a period of constant religious and political turmoil in England and in Europe, which culminated in the English Civil Wars, the first of which was fought between the King, Charles I, and Parliament, represented by the Puritan Oliver Cromwell. This conflict spread to Bermuda, where a period of civil strife resulted in a victory for the supporters of the Royalist Party in the English Civil War. The struggle eventually led to the expulsion of the colony's Puritans and independence of the Bahamas, which the English had laid claim to in 1629, but had not permanently settled. Earlier in 1644, the Bermudian independent Puritans had sent an expedition to explore these new islands, but one vessel was lost and the other failed to find a suitable island. Establishment of the colony. Nevertheless, sometime between spring 1646 and autumn 1648, Sale took some 70 people to settle in the Bahamas. They made landfall on the island called Sagatia, which they named Eleutheria, from the Greek word for freedom, although the name later became Eleuthera. The island's original inhabitants, the Lucayans, had been decimated through the slaving activities of the Spanish and the numerous European diseases, especially smallpox, that followed. The settlers ran into trouble before they even landed, when they encountered a storm and the ship ran aground onto rocks, later called the Devil's Backbone, north of Spanish Wells. The adventurers found their way ashore and took refuge in what was later called Preacher's Cave, where a religious service was held every year for the next 100 years on the anniversary in thankfulness for their survival. However, although the settlers had shelter, they had lost their provisions and so had no food. Sale took 8 men in a small boat and went to Virginia to help, where he got a ship and supplies and went to relieve the others. More colonists expelled from Bermuda arrived in 1649 and also faced the predicament of inadequate supplies. This time it was the sympathetic Puritans of New England who rallied to their cause and collected £800 for all the supplies they needed, allowing the colony to survive. The Eleutheran people later showed their thankfulness by sending shiploads of the extremely valuable Braziletto wood to Boston, with instructions to sell it and donate the proceeds to Harvard University. Another source of trouble for the colony was dissent within its ranks from the beginning. Before they had even landed, a Captain Butler made so many problems by refusing to accept any authority that Sale and others were obliged to find another island. They named the new island they moved to Sale Island, which was later renamed New Providence. The colony was not an immediate success in economic terms. Its soil yielded little production and the settlers barely got by during their first years, being obliged to live by salvaging what they could from shipwrecks. Sale, however, was a very resourceful man, and secured a number of supplies from the mainland colonies. Despite this, the colony did not do much better in the following years, and in the end only a few hardcore settlers from the original Eleutherans were left. Sale himself went on to become governor of South Carolina, but continued to have a vested personal interest in Eleuthera. He used this influence to secure some trade for the island and so helped the community through its infancy. This episode is thought to be the historical source of Andrew Marvell's poem, Bermudas, written in praise of the Puritan settlers of the New World, and one of the earliest statements of the so-called American Dream. According to the Norton Anthology of English Literature, the poem was probably written after 1653, when Marvell took up residence in the house of John Oxenbridge, who had twice visited the Bermudas. Articles of 1647. The new colony was to be governed by the Articles and Orders of 1647, drawn up by William Sale. The Articles reflect the ambiguities of the English Civil War taking place at that time between Royalists and Parliamentarians. Therefore, while the preamble refers to the reign of our sovereign Lord Charles, by the grace of God, King of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, and c. the Articles themselves make clear that the new settlement was to be effectively independent, making no further mention of the Crown. On the contrary, the Articles speak of the rules governing the members of the Republic and the magistracy or officers of the Republic. The Articles established freedom of religion and opinion, 300 acres of land per settler, governance under a governor and 12 councillors chosen from a senate composed of the first 100 settlers, and humane treatment of any indigenous people still on the island. It has been noted that if Sale's settlement had been successful, then he would have created in the Bahamas, the first democratic state in the New World, some 130 years before the American Revolution.